I never liked being called into my boss's office. It was always sterile, clinical, silent, the kind of silence that feels like a warning. So when she buzzed me in that Tuesday morning, I braced myself for some new complaint. Another thing I had done wrong. Another performance review laced with tight smiles and corporate disappointment. But this time was different. She didn't say anything, just gestured for me to sit. Then, without looking me in the eye, she picked up her phone, tapped a few times, and turned the screen around to face me. It was a photo, and in it, clear as daylight, was my husband, smiling, arm wrapped around someone I recognized from this very office, someone I'd seen laughing in the break room, sending cheerful emails, casually brushing past me without a second glance. My heart stopped, literally stopped. I could feel the world freeze around me, like someone had pulled the sound from the air and left me with nothing but the image. My husband, her, their faces pressed close, too close, his hand resting low on her back like he had touched her 1,000 times before. I stared, then blinked, thinking maybe I had misread. Maybe it was a trick of the light, or maybe it was old, or photoshopped, or anything that made sense. Why are you showing me this? I finally managed. My boss didn't answer. She just tilted her head, studying me like I was an experiment, like she was curious how long I'd last before cracking. The air between us grew dense, heavy with things unspoken. My fingers itched, trembling, wanting to snatch the phone, to zoom in, to prove to myself it wasn't what it looked like. But I knew it was. Deep down, I knew. I'd known something was wrong for months in my marriage, in this office, in the way my life had subtly twisted into a knot I couldn't untangle. Where was this taken? I asked, already dreading the answer. She shrugged. Does it matter? It did, but not in the way I expected. Because what mattered more than the betrayal, more than the implications, was the look in her eyes. Calm, measured, almost triumphant. That's when the pieces began to click. The strange assignments, the cold shoulder from coworkers, the constant micromanaging, the way she'd single me out during meetings, pressuring me with impossible deadlines while pretending it was just part of the job. All this time, I thought I was just underperforming. All this time, I thought I was the problem. But no, the problem was never my work ethic. It was never my skills or my attitude or my team compatibility. The problem was my existence. Because I was married to the man in that photo. Because I had been unknowingly standing in the way of something or someone this entire time. I stood up, feeling like the floor might vanish beneath me. My boss didn't stop me. She just watched, satisfied, like she had finally dropped the match on a pile of gasoline-soaked secrets. I walked out of her office on legs that barely worked, clutching my phone, heart pounding so hard I could taste blood in my mouth. I didn't cry. Not yet. But that photo, that single image, was a crack in the dam. And once I saw it, really saw it, I realized it wasn't just my marriage unraveling. It was my entire life. My name is Claire, and this is the story of how my boss destroyed everything I thought I knew, starting with a single photo. We met at a mutual friend's engagement party, one of those too loud, over-decorated affairs where you have to shout over the music just to ask someone's name. I remember the way he leaned in to hear me, the soft grin playing on his lips when I said, Claire. He had kind eyes. Not the kind you immediately fall for, but the kind that make you feel like you've known him forever. His name was Daniel. He was warm, thoughtful, the type of man who noticed when you were low and brought you your favorite takeout without asking. The kind who left sticky notes on the mirror before an early meeting. You've got this. I love you. The kind who made tea the exact way I liked it, never too strong, always with just a splash of almond milk. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. It was in a quiet little cabin up north, surrounded by pine trees and silence. He knelt on a squeaky old floorboard, with a trembling hand and eyes that begged me to say yes. I said yes without thinking. The wedding was simple, intimate, friends, family, laughter, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. The first few years were smooth, not perfect, but comfortable. He worked in IT consulting, always on his laptop, always a bit distracted but never too far away. I was working my way up in a medium-sized marketing firm. We had Sunday rituals, pancakes, coffee, a walk through the neighborhood park. We made grocery lists together. We planned vacations we couldn't afford. We laughed in bed over dumb inside jokes. We shared Spotify playlists and complained about our neighbors and binge-watched entire seasons of crime shows in a single night. There were fights, of course, sometimes over dishes, sometimes over things neither of us could name, but we made up quickly. He was never cruel, just distant sometimes. Like there was a part of him he couldn't bring to the table. I used to chalk it up to stress, the kind everyone carries in their own way. I was proud of our marriage. People at work called us the couple who still flirts after 5 years. When I showed coworkers our vacation photos, they'd sigh and say, "You two are goals." I clung to that because it meant we were doing something right. It meant I was doing something right. Even as things at the office began to shift, even as I felt myself becoming more isolated, I never thought to connect it to him. Why would I? My world with Daniel felt separate, untouched. He wasn't just my husband, he was my safe space. I still remember the last time he surprised me with flowers. It wasn't an anniversary or birthday, just a random Tuesday. He came home late, a bouquet of white tulips in one hand and takeout in the other. Said he'd thought of me when he passed the florist. Kissed my forehead like he used to when we first moved in together. I placed the tulips in the vase on our kitchen counter, breathing them in like some kind of promise. Looking back, I think that was the night I should have known something was wrong, because it felt too perfect, because his kiss felt a little forced, and his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. But I ignored it. I didn't want to poke holes in a moment that felt so whole. I didn't want to be suspicious. I didn't want to be that kind of wife, the paranoid, insecure, nagging one who questions everything. So I leaned into the good. I let myself believe it was still real. Besides, work was becoming a nightmare. My boss, Miranda, had always been intense, but over the last year, something had shifted. She became calculated. Her praise turned cold, her critiques sharper. She began assigning me to projects she knew I couldn't complete alone, gave me deadlines designed to fail, took credit for things I'd written, questioned my tone in emails, pushed me out of meetings I used to lead. I blamed myself, thought I'd lost my edge, that maybe I was burning out and didn't realize it. Daniel would listen at dinner, nodding along, offering vague advice. Don't take it personally. Maybe she's just under pressure. He never got angry on my behalf, never asked for names, never told me I deserved better. I told myself it was just his way. He wasn't confrontational. He didn't like drama. He was calm, level-headed, everything I was not when I was hurt. Still, something kept whispering in my gut. That whisper turned into a voice when I started noticing the changes in him. Late nights became normal. He said he was working with a new client in another time zone. He was always just about to call me, but never did. He started locking his phone, said it was company policy. His laptop was password protected. When I asked for the new code, he smiled and said, "It's complicated. You wouldn't remember it anyway." There were new clothes, more cologne, a renewed interest in the gym. And yet, I still didn't think he was cheating. Because Daniel wasn't that kind of man. Because when I look back at our years together, they were filled with softness and loyalty and rituals that felt too deeply embedded to fake. Because I loved him. And I believed I needed to believe he loved me too. I told myself we were just in a rough patch, that he was tired, that I was projecting my office stress onto our marriage, that we'd get through it like we always had. But there was a folder. I didn't know it then. I didn't know that, hidden behind the passwords and the work excuses and the tulips, there was a folder I wasn't supposed to find. And once I did, everything would change. It always starts small. That's what they never tell you about betrayal. It doesn't explode into your life like a bomb it seeps in, like a leak behind the walls. Silent, patient, destroying the structure long before you see the cracks. Daniel's late nights didn't alarm me at first. He'd always been a hard worker. Client work, he'd say, setting down his bag and kissing the top of my head like always. Tight deadline. You know how it is. And I did know. I was drowning in deadlines of my own. So I nodded, smiled, asked if he wanted dinner. He always said no, said he'd already eaten, or that he was too tired. He'd shower, pour himself a drink, and disappear into his office. I told myself it was a phase, until the phase became routine. His hugs grew shorter. His eyes drifted past mine during conversations. He started texting at odd hours, always angling the screen away. I used to sit beside him on the couch while we watched Netflix. Now he sat across the room, needing space to stretch out. One night, I reached for his phone to check the time. He flinched. He laughed it off. Sorry, reflex. Work's been crazy, lots of NDAs. I let it go. Then came the clothes. Daniel was never stylish. He was the flannel and sneakers type. But suddenly, there were slim-cut dress shirts, tailored pants, expensive cologne that smelled unfamiliar, a new watch, a gym membership he used religiously. He said he was getting healthier. I wanted to believe him. But something in my stomach twisted every time he walked out the door looking like he was headed to a date. Meanwhile, work was spiraling. Miranda, my boss, had turned my job into a daily tightrope walk. She'd nitpick every email I wrote, question every decision, send passive-aggressive messages about my tone and collaboration style. Projects I used to lead were reassigned without explanation. Coworkers who once grabbed lunch with me now kept their distance. When I asked if something was wrong, they'd smile too tightly and say, "Oh no, nothing, just busy." I wasn't just being iced out, I was being erased. I tried to talk to Daniel about it, told him how Miranda seemed to have it out for me, how my confidence was cracking, how I'd cry in my car during lunch breaks just to get through the day. He listened, but he didn't hear me. "You're probably overthinking," he said. "You're under a lot of stress. Don't let your mind make enemies out of people." I nodded, but a voice in my head whispered, "Then why does it feel like they already have?" I started waking up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, thoughts racing. I'd stare at the ceiling, listening to the silence of our home, wondering when it had started to feel like a stranger's house. Daniel slept soundly beside me, his back turned, as if our dreams were no longer aligned. One afternoon, I stayed late at the office. The building was quiet. Most people had gone home. I was organizing files on the shared drive when I came across a folder with my name in it, not from me, but about me. I clicked. Inside were notes from Miranda, performance logs, emails flagged, comments I'd made during meetings, taken out of context and tagged as concerning tone. Even screenshots of my Slack messages, harmless things like "this timeline feels tight," annotated with comments like inflexible or passive-aggressive. My chest tightened. This wasn't feedback. This was a case being built against me. I printed nothing, took no screenshots, just closed the folder and sat there, stunned. When I got home, Daniel was in the kitchen, sipping wine. He smiled, kissed me on the cheek, asked how my day was. I lied, said it was fine, asked about his. He said he'd had lunch with a client. Nice guy, talked my ear off. But I knew he didn't have meetings that day. His calendar was always visible on our shared fridge whiteboard, and today had been blank. That was the first time I felt something snap. The next morning, I tried to access the folder again. It was gone, as if it had never existed. I stared at the blank screen, feeling like I was losing my grip on reality. Then came the email. Anonymous. No subject. Just one line. "He isn't who you think he is, and neither is she." I read it 3 times, heart pounding. Hit reply. Undeliverable. The next day, another email. This one had a photo, blurry, taken from a distance. But I knew that back. I knew the way he carried his bag, the curve of his shoulders. Daniel, and he was walking beside Miranda. Their arms brushed, their faces tilted close. It wasn't obviously intimate, not quite. But there was a familiarity there that made my skin crawl. I printed nothing, said nothing, just stared at the image until the office lights dimmed around me. That night, Daniel came home later than usual, said there'd been a crash on the highway. I asked him where he'd been. He listed places in that same calm voice, never hesitated. But I was no longer listening for content, I was listening for tone. And something in that tone said, "I know you don't believe me, and I don't care." I wanted to scream, to confront him, to throw the photo on the table and demand the truth. But something held me back. Maybe I needed more. Maybe I wanted to see just how deep the rot went. Maybe I needed him to look me in the eye and lie one more time before I stopped giving him the benefit of the doubt. Or maybe I wasn't ready to know. Not yet, because knowing would mean admitting that my perfect life was already gone. I found the folder again 2 days later. It wasn't on the shared drive anymore. It was on a USB I didn't recognize, plugged into the side of my work computer when I arrived at my desk one morning. No name, no label, just there, waiting. I stared at it for a long time, like it might explode. Then I opened it. Inside was a single folder titled Contingency, Q4. I double-clicked. Subfolders bloomed across the screen. Legal, personal, finances, photos. My pulse roared in my ears. I told myself to walk away, that this wasn't mine, that this was some elaborate trap meant to push me over the edge. But my hand moved before my brain caught up, and I clicked on legal first. There were PDFs, scanned documents. One titled Initial Divorce Draft, Claire Thompson and Daniel Reyes. I froze. I hadn't even considered divorce. We hadn't even had a serious fight, not one big enough to trigger lawyers, but there it was, dated 3 months ago. I opened the file. My name in black ink. His signature below it. No note, no warning, just cold, sterile language about joint assets and division of property. The house was listed under his name. My car was marked as negotiable. There was a clause about conflict of interest in relation to workplace entanglements. I scrolled down to the fine print. He had been preparing to leave me. Silently, strategically, while I was still packing him lunch and washing his shirts and defending him to my friends. I clicked into finances next. Bank statements. Some familiar, most not. There was a new account I didn't recognize opened 6 months ago, under a name I'd never heard but with Daniel's birthday listed as a security marker. It was loaded. Tens of thousands of dollars moved into it from various sources. Some from his business, sure, but others came from what looked like private payments marked vaguely as consultation fees from companies I'd never seen on his tax records. And then there was one labeled simply MRD Payroll Discretionary Bonus. I opened it. A spreadsheet. There was my name in one column, Miranda's in another, and next to hers, a transfer of $12,000, recurring, monthly, from Daniel's company. My mouth went dry. Was she consulting for him? Was he paying her? Was it hush money? I didn't know. I just knew it wasn't right. I opened the photos folder next. This one hurt more than the others. They weren't graphic, but they were intimate. Daniel sitting across from Miranda in restaurants I recognized. Daniel leaning over her desk, my boss's desk, with coffee in hand, the two of them laughing. There were selfies. A few. Miranda with her head resting on Daniel's shoulder, him kissing her temple, smiling like a man in love. Each image felt like a blade. Not because they were shocking, but because they weren't. Because they looked comfortable, familiar, like they had years between them, not just months. I clicked through them all, heart crumbling with every photo. The last file was a video, just a few seconds long. I hesitated, then hit play. Daniel's voice. You sure she won't find out? Miranda's. She's too busy falling apart at work to notice what's happening at home. They laughed. The screen went black. I sat there in silence. Long after the video ended, long after the office around me faded into background noise, long after my world rearranged itself into something I didn't recognize. Because this wasn't just an affair. This was a strategy. A coordinated, deliberate dismantling of my reality. They had planned this. Together. While I stayed up late finishing proposals, while I cried in the parking lot, while I blamed myself for everything going wrong, they were building a new life. Without me. I wanted to scream, throw the monitor, burn the USB. Instead, I copied everything onto my personal drive. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet. I just knew I needed it. Proof. Anchor. Something solid to hold on to in the middle of this freefall. Later that night, I sat on the edge of our bed and watched Daniel brush his teeth like nothing had changed. He joked about traffic, asked what I wanted for dinner. I said I wasn't hungry. He shrugged, unfazed. He kissed my cheek before bed, pulled me in close like he still had the right. And I left, not because I was weak, but because I needed more time to figure out who I was without him, to figure out what I was going to do, and because tomorrow I'd go back into that office and look Miranda in the eye. I used to admire Miranda. She was sharp, commanding, the kind of woman who walked into a room and made everyone straighten their spine. She wore heels like armor and spoke in short, measured sentences that left no room for negotiation. I thought she was brilliant, tough but fair, someone I could learn from. Now I saw her differently. I saw the slight smirk she gave me in meetings, the clipped tone, the way her compliments always had teeth. I saw how she isolated me from projects, how she fostered alliances with others while letting me sink. It hadn't been professional strategy. It had been personal, and I wanted to know why. So I did something I hadn't done in months. I looked at Miranda, really looked, that morning, in the reflection of the elevator doors. I studied the angles of her face. Her hair was pulled into its usual sleek twist, her blouse pressed, her lips painted in that same muted coral. But beneath the surface, there was something else. Something familiar. It gnawed at me all day, like déjà vu with a razor's edge. I pulled up our company's old employee photos, ones from the yearly retreat last fall, back when things still felt normal. There she was, arms linked with two junior VPs, smiling for the camera. I zoomed in on her face, her jawline, her eyes. It hit me then. Not from work. From a photo Daniel kept in one of his old college albums. I scrambled through our hallway storage that night like a madwoman, dust flying, cardboard boxes toppling, memories I hadn't touched in years spilling across the carpet. I found the album tucked between old yearbooks and a folder of tax documents. Page 23. There, Daniel at a college party, solo cup in hand, grinning like an idiot, arm thrown around two women. One of them was an old girlfriend I recognized. The other, Miranda, younger, blonder, but unmistakably hair. They had history, and not just professional history. I flipped through more photos. The three of them again, seated on a couch, tangled in each other's space. Miranda sitting far too close to Daniel. Another with her hand on his knee. One with him kissing her cheek while she laughed. How had I never noticed this? How had he never mentioned it? I closed the album with trembling hands. This wasn't just an affair. This was a resumption. A réunion. A rekindling of something that had never really burned out. Which meant from the very beginning, this hadn't been some accidental office affair or a recent lapse in judgment. It had roots. Old ones. Deep ones. Ones I'd been too blind to see growing underneath everything. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces side by side across a decade. I thought of how Miranda had interviewed me, smiled at me, mentored me, how she'd chosen me for her team, how, from day one, I'd felt something off, but ignored it because I wanted to belong. I wondered if she'd planned it all, if she'd kept tabs on Daniel for years, if I had ever truly been the one he wanted, or just a placeholder. The next morning, I got to the office early. Miranda arrived minutes later. Heels clicking against the tile, phone pressed to her ear. She didn't see me standing by the copy machine. Or maybe she did, and just didn't care. I watched her laugh at something, her smile too relaxed for a woman with so much to hide. I followed her into the break room under the guise of making coffee. She poured herself tea, then turned, startled, or pretending to be when she saw me. "Morning, Claire," she said, cool as always. I met her gaze. "We've met before, haven't we?" A pause, just long enough to tell me she understood the question beneath the question. "I don't think so," she said slowly. "College. Now you were close with Daniel." Another pause, this one tighter. Her smile returned, smaller this time. "Ah, right. Small world." I stepped closer. "Is that why you hired me?" I asked. "Claire, did you recognize me? Did you already know who I was when I walked in for the interview?" She didn't answer. Didn't need to. Her silence was confirmation. I used to think the way you treated me was professional, I said, voice low. Just pressure, expectations. Turns out, it was personal. She sipped her tea. You're letting your emotions cloud your judgment. And you're letting yours destroy your credibility. For the first time, her eyes narrowed. You think you're the only one who's been lied to? She said. You think Daniel told me the truth? About you? About your marriage? He blinked. He said you were cold, she continued. Obsessive. Controlling. That he stayed with you out of guilt. The words didn't even sting, not because they weren't cruel, but because they were rehearsed. They were his lines. The ones he used to justify the mess he created. I'd heard their echo in his excuses, his distance, the way he'd shifted the blame every time I asked what was wrong. Did he also tell you we were trying for a baby? I asked. She flinched, just slightly. No, she said after a moment. He didn't. Because we were, I said, 3 months ago. Her eyes flicked away. I lost it, I whispered, while he was with you. The break room fell silent. I didn't expect pity. I didn't want it. I just wanted her to know, to carry that weight. To realize this wasn't just a game she won, it was a life she helped dismantle. One whispered lie at a time. Miranda cleared her throat, straightened her shoulders. This isn't the place. I agree, I said, cutting her off. Next time, we'll talk in court. I walked out before she could respond. Back at my desk, I opened my laptop and began drafting an email to HR. It was time. Time to document. Time to extract myself from this poisoned web. Time to stop asking why they did it and start deciding what I'd do next. But before I could hit send, my phone buzzed. A new message. From Daniel. We need to talk. Now. Daniel was already in the driveway when I got home. His car idled, windows up, engine running like he hadn't quite decided if he was staying or going. When I stepped out of mine, he jumped out, leaving the door wide open. He looked disheveled, like he hadn't slept. His shirt was wrinkled, hair out of place, tie crooked. But his voice was steady. We need to talk. I didn't answer, just walked past him, up the porch, unlocked the front door, and stepped inside. He followed like a dog that knew it had bitten the wrong hand. In the living room, he hovered near the couch while I kicked off my shoes and dropped my bag. My heart was pounding, but I kept my face still, flat, controlled. I didn't want it to happen like this, he said. I almost laughed. How did you want it to happen, I asked. A PowerPoint? Maybe a nice dinner where you slowly ease me into the idea that my husband's been paying my boss to emotionally dismantle me? He flinched. That's not what... I saw the video, Daniel. Silence. His shoulders slumped. I didn't plan it, he said. We reconnected by accident, at a conference. She was just there. And things with us. Don't, I snapped. Don't do that thing where you rewrite history to make yourself the victim. He ran a hand through his hair. You were different, distant. You started putting work first. Everything became about control, about goals and checklists and timelines. It didn't feel like a marriage anymore. And so instead of talking to me, you fed that narrative to someone who already wanted to believe the worst about me. He looked away. I studied him. This man I'd shared a life with, slept beside, laughed with, trusted. And now, all I saw was someone who had underestimated me. I let the silence hang for a moment. Then I said calmly, I've contacted a lawyer. His head snapped back. What? I copied every file, every message, every bank statement, every photo. I'm documenting everything. Claire, comment? I'm not going to scream, or cry, or beg you to stay. That version of me? She's gone. He stepped toward me. We don't have to destroy each other. But you already did, Daniel. You just thought I wouldn't notice until it was too late. His face crumbled slightly. You were never supposed to find that folder, he muttered. I know. He sank onto the couch, elbows on knees, head in his hands. I messed up. That's generous. He looked up. I still love you. I stared at him for a long time, then said, You love the woman you could lie to, the one who worshipped you, who built her whole life around a man who was slowly unbuilding her. You don't love me. Not this version. Not the one who's standing right here, watching you unravel." He said nothing, because he knew I was right. That night, after he left suitcase in hand, face hollow, I sat at the kitchen table and opened a new folder on my laptop. Exit plan. I itemized the joint accounts, contacted the lawyer, printed every document twice. I updated my passwords, closed the joint credit cards, moved my direct deposit to a new checking account. At work, I played the game. Smiled, nodded, pretended I didn't know that Miranda flinched every time I entered a room. I documented everything. Times, dates, passive-aggressive comments. I requested my HR file. I reviewed internal policy. I prepared. I stopped talking to coworkers, stopped engaging in gossip. I became cold, silent, focused. And it worked. Miranda stopped antagonizing me, not out of guilt, but because she sensed the shift. She no longer controlled the room when I entered. Because I no longer sought her approval. I wasn't afraid anymore. Because I had a plan. I started waking up before sunrise, running 3 miles, cooking breakfast, not because I was healing, but because I needed control over my body, over my time, over something. I got a new phone, burned the old one, changed my number, deleted every photo of Daniel from my cloud, my laptop, my mind. I met with the lawyer twice a week. We built a timeline, a strategy. I collected audio, screenshots, witness statements. I was no longer documenting pain, I was building a case. For the first time in months, I felt powerful. Not angry, not bitter, not even sad. Just sharpened. Like a weapon that had finally remembered its purpose. I wasn't the same woman who smiled at company picnics or left love notes in Daniel's briefcase. I wasn't the woman who apologized when others stepped on her toes. I wasn't fragile. I was surgical, precise. And when the time came, I'd make one cut clean, deep, irreversible. And they would never see it coming. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. Not Daniel. Not Miranda. Not HR. Not even my mother. It wasn't a grand exit. There was no tearful goodbye. No loud confrontation in the middle of the office. No final fight or thrown ring or screaming match on the front lawn. Just silence. And movement. The night before, I packed everything I truly owned, not the shared dishes or the throw blankets we argued about at HomeGoods, not the photo frames filled with fake smiles, just my laptop, a box of journals, a small jewelry pouch, a canvas bag with 4 outfits, a toothbrush, and the divorce papers, unsigned but real. At 3 a.m., I slipped out of our bed for the last time. Daniel didn't stir. His face was turned toward the wall, the same wall he'd been facing for months, the one I'd spoken to more often than I'd spoken to him. I stood in the doorway for a moment and looked at him, really looked as if trying to see if there was any part of me that still loved him. There wasn't 82. By sunrise, I had checked into a short-term rental with cold floors, white walls, and no history. The air smelled like bleach and beginnings. I brewed bad coffee and watched the city wake up from behind unfamiliar curtains. I didn't cry. My body had already exhausted that function weeks ago. What replaced it was something cleaner, calmer, like emptiness, but sharp around the edges. At 9 a.m., I walked into the office for the last time. I had rehearsed every detail. The hour I'd arrive, the route I'd take through the building, the timing of the resignation email that would drop 30 minutes after I was gone. I brought nothing with me but a flash drive and a sealed envelope. The flash drive went into the HR inbox. The envelope went onto Miranda's desk. It was addressed in handwriting I made as neat as possible. She wasn't in yet. Perfect. I walked past her framed accolades, past the photos of her at fundraisers, shaking hands with people whose names I would never know, past the glass wall where she'd once smirked at me through her reflection, thinking I was too stupid to see her, down the hallway, to the elevator. Each step felt surreal, like walking away from a life I'd dreamed, one that had curdled into a nightmare so slowly I hadn't noticed until I was wide awake. In the lobby, I looked back only once, not out of regret, but to confirm, this chapter is over. I stepped outside and felt the cold hit my face like a baptism. No one followed me. No one called my name. The world kept turning. and I finally had stopped spinning inside someone else's story. 3 days after I left, Daniel showed up at the rental. He didn't knock right away. I saw him from the window, standing on the sidewalk with that same brown leather jacket he wore the first time he picked me up for dinner, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the building, like he was waiting for a sign. Eventually, he rang the buzzer. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, a text came through. "I'm not here to fight, please. Just a conversation." I should have ignored him. But a part of me, the ghost of who I was, wanted to hear what kind of story he'd tell. So I opened the door. He looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but spiritually, like a balloon half deflated but still trying to float. He gave me a tight smile, the kind that once melted me. Now it barely registered. "Nice place," he said. I didn't answer, just stepped aside and let him in. He didn't sit, just stood there shifting from foot to foot, looking around like he expected the walls to judge him. "I've been thinking a lot," he began, "about what I did, about what I should have done differently. I stayed silent. I made a mistake." I raised an eyebrow. "You made a series of choices. Mistakes are accidents. You planned yours." He flinched, but recovered. "Okay, yes, I did. But it got out of hand. I didn't mean to hurt you. You paid my boss to destroy me, Daniel." His jaw tightened. "It wasn't like that. She got monthly payments from your company, labeled discretionary bonuses, while sabotaging my career. Don't insult me by pretending that's a coincidence." He looked down. "It started as a favor. She needed help. She needed help getting me out of the way." He didn't deny it. Instead, he tried something else. "She told me things," he said. "Said you were manipulative, controlling, that you hated your job, hated your life, hated me." I laughed. Cold, short. "And you believed her?" "I was confused," he said. "You were pulling away." "I was breaking, Daniel, because the two people I trusted most were eroding my sanity from both sides." He exhaled shakily. "I didn't expect to fall back in with her. We were just reconnecting, catching up. And then you realized you could have her and dismantle me in the same breath. That's not fair. You don't get to use that word. Not anymore." He finally sat, elbows on his knees, rubbing his temples like this conversation was hurting him. "I miss you," he said quietly. "No, you missed the version of me that didn't know. The one who still made you coffee and believed your excuses. The woman who smiled through your silence." He looked up. "You've changed." "I had to. You made sure of it." He leaned back. "So what now? You disappear? Pretend this never happened?" "No," I said. "I document it. I survive it. And I make sure no one else has to walk blind into the same trap." He swallowed hard. "I lost control." "No," I said, standing. "You were in complete control. That was the problem." He looked like he wanted to cry. I didn't care. "You chose convenience over honesty," I continued. "Power over love. And now you're here, trying to rewrite the story so you don't come out looking like the villain." "I am not a villain." "Then stop acting like one." A long pause. Then he stood, slowly, like the weight of everything was finally registering. "I guess this is it then." I nodded. He looked at me one last time. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me." I held his gaze. "And you were the worst thing I never saw coming." He walked to the door, paused. "I hope one day you forgive me." I didn't respond, didn't move, didn't flinch. Just let the door close behind him like a final period. I never responded to his last text. Not the apology. Not the long paragraph at 2:13 a.m. that began with, "I know I screwed up," and ended with, "You'll always be my home." Not the voicemail where he cried. I let the silence do the talking. It turns out, silence carries weight, more than shouting ever could. It fills a room. It sharpens the edges of memory. And it's the one thing narcissists can't tolerate: being unseen, unheard, unwelcome. The day I sent the official letter to his lawyer, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still, like someone standing in the eye of a storm they no longer feared. The case was clean. My lawyer was surgical, emotionless in the best way. We had the evidence, the timelines, the audio, the paper trail. Everything in neat, labeled folders. Daniel didn't contest anything. He signed the agreement without a fight. Maybe he thought it would win back some dignity. Maybe he thought I'd soften. I didn't. A week later, I received an email from HR. Miranda had been placed on administrative leave pending internal investigation. No apology, no acknowledgement of what she did. Just an automated note stating that I was no longer expected to return to work and my severance had been approved. I stared at the screen, then closed the laptop. No reply, no victory lap, just closure. But not the cinematic kind. Not the crying on the floor, burn it all down, dramatic music in the background kind. This closure was quieter, heavier, more mature than I wanted it to be. I'd imagined revenge so many times, how it might feel to walk into Miranda's office and drop the USB on her desk like a bomb. How satisfying it would be to watch Daniel squirm under the weight of truth, to hear them beg. But instead, I chose silence. Because silence doesn't require permission. It doesn't invite rebuttal. It simply is. Final. A few nights later, I stood in front of the mirror and barely recognized myself. Not because I looked different, though I did. I'd cut my hair, tossed the makeup I used to wear for him, bought clothes that didn't remind me of company parties or dinner dates or manipulated mornings. But because my eyes were no longer searching for something, they were focused, certain, the kind of eyes that had seen it all and still chose peace. I lit a candle, wrote a note, burned it. I don't remember exactly what it said, something about goodbye, about gratitude twisted with grief, about how forgiveness isn't a gift you give to someone else. It's something you reclaim for yourself when you're ready to stop bleeding for other people's wounds. I watched the paper curl and blacken. Then I opened the window and let the ashes go. I didn't move out of the rental right away. At first, I told myself it was temporary, just a stopgap until I figured out what came next. But days turned into weeks, and the place started to feel like mine. Not because it was cozy or beautiful. It wasn't. The floors creaked. The windows stuck. The water pressure was a joke. But it was mine. No ghosts in the closet. No hidden files on the computer. No lips kissing my forehead out of obligation. Just space and air and quiet. So much quiet. For a while, I didn't feel it. No music, no TV, no phone calls. Just the sound of healing, which, I've learned, is sometimes indistinguishable from loneliness. But that's okay. Some things you have to do alone, like grieving a version of yourself that allowed so many small betrayals to pile up until you didn't recognize your own reflection. Like learning how to eat breakfast without someone else's schedule shaping your morning. Like rebuilding your idea of love from the ground up, not because you want to find someone new, but because you need to remember what love looks like when it's directed inward. I started running again. Not to burn calories or chase aesthetics, but to feel the rhythm of my own feet hitting the ground. Proof that I still move forward, even when it hurts. I took a ceramics class. Signed up for a weekend retreat. Really laughed with strangers who didn't know my past and didn't care. And for the first time in years, I didn't measure my worth by someone else's gaze. I didn't need Daniel's validation. I didn't fear Miranda's disapproval. I didn't live my life bracing for impact. I just lived. One morning, I opened my laptop and deleted the folder. The one labeled evidence. All of it. Not out of forgiveness. Not because I was letting go in the poetic sense, but because I didn't need it anymore. I didn't need proof of the past to justify the future I was building. A future that finally includes me. Not the version of me who compromised. Not the version who contorted herself to fit into someone else's outline. But the one who stood up, walked away, and didn't look back. The one who knows that being alone isn't the same as being empty. The one who understands that closure isn't something you get from others, it's something you decide. This is my decision. This is my ending. Or maybe it's the beginning I deserved all along.